Hi, my name is Hannah, and today we're interviewing Sean. Sean Tierney is the founder of Charity Makeover, a global movement to mobilize knowledge worker for good. Today he gives us his view on key trends as we emerge into a post-pandemic world.
This podcast channel is about you, successful international entrepreneurs, successful expats, successful investors. Sponsored by HTJ Tax. And we're live. Good morning, Sean. How are you today?
Good. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. So for those who may be watching on YouTube or listening to us on any one of our podcast platforms, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Sean Tierney. I do a lot of things. I run something called Charity Makeover. I've also got a company called Grid 7 where I do sales consulting for startups and early stage companies that are transitioning into that growth mode. And yeah, I live in Lisbon. We met the other night at a digital nomad meetup, and you asked me to be on your show.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Could you tell me a bit about Grid 7, please?
Yeah, Grid 7 is really just like an umbrella holding company that I do a lot of things underneath it. It's the primary thing that I'm doing right now is I'm working with early stage startups to get them, not early stage. They figured out product market fit. They're now in that mode, that kind of awkward, prepubescent mode of like, how do we take this thing that's working and actually start to scale it? And so I have some good experience. I was 5 years as the head of marketing and sales for a hosting company. And we grew from 8 employees to like 42 employees when I left. And so I've got some experience in that mode of like, how do we really ramp up our MRR?
I would imagine your sweet spot would really be like e-commerce businesses. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean SaaS. So the companies the one that I'm particularly working with right now is it plays in the WordPress space. It has a caching technology that helps specifically commerce sites run faster. And so yeah, it's a logical thing. Like if there's commerce transactions involved, it's just a math equation to figure out like what money they're leaving on the table by having a faster site. So I like things that are an easy sell where they just haven't. Like it's easy to quantify the opportunity. You just need to go in there and tell a story and do a better job marketing. So,
okay, understood. And your other activity, the charity drive. Can you tell me about that? Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah. So Charity Makeover. It's funny. I started this as an experiment many years ago. We've done 8 of them now. And what this is, it's a lot like Startup Weekend. If anyone listening is familiar with that initiative. But it's basically a hackathon that we do where we bring people, all different skill sets, maybe 40 people on a Saturday. And you've got like developers, designers, copywriters, marketing people, email, SEO gurus, all the videographers. So people from all different walks. And we get together and we pick local charities in the place that we're at. And we build stuff to change the game for them in a positive way. And typically this winds up being, campaign fundraising type stuff, crowdfunding platforms, email marketing campaigns, whatever they need. These are little local charities that are very good at what they do, but they're not particularly good at the digital marketing stuff. And so we basically do like a kind of, I think of it like that show Extreme Home Makeover, if you've ever seen that, where they parachute in and fix someone's house. We do that only with like the digital aspects of charities.
Okay.
And so yeah, I've been doing that for some time. Went full time on it in February, and then of course the pandemic hit, and it just changed the game of how we have to operate with that. So I'm in the midst of now retooling this to be a little bit different in how we operate. We can't do the big events anymore, but we're going to a smaller event format.
Understood. And what kind of inspired you to take this on?
So I had been to a number of startup weekends, that event that I mentioned. That is basically the equivalent of this, only instead of helping charities, they bring strangers together and try to invent so we can pull that together and launch it. And it's a super compelling format. It's great because you meet all these people, you learn a lot, you get exposed to different disciplines you never would. And I just kind of fell in love with that format, but I saw a problem with how efficient it was or wasteful it was, really, because what you had was all these people come together, they get really excited, they build something cool, and then at the end of the weekend they kind of all go their separate ways, and this product that they just created just vaporizes, like it dies. And so I thought, well, could we get that same experience, the same learning benefits and the same fun of the weekend, only instead of it dying after that, like if we paired up with local charities, then that would live on afterwards and it would help the charities and they would be thrilled to have it. So yeah, so that was kind of the inspiration for it and the genesis of it.
Okay, and I guess it's pretty topical, in the sense that, as I myself, as a location independent professional, have visited some of the hubs, like, for example, Bali or Chiang Mai. That's been part of the discussion that, okay, these are people from Western countries, from basically wealthy nations, have descended in a lower income community. And then there's a lot of back and forth as to, okay, what is the relationship? Is it exploitative? Do we give back? How do we add value? So I guess that perhaps feeds into that narrative that we as location independent professionals from the West do somehow give back to the communities that we live amongst, at least for part of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good regardless of if you're a nomad or not. Like if
Right.
you're a local, sedentary in your home city, still it's rewarding. Like, no one, to me, like people do like donate to charity for a reason, but I think the most valuable gift you can donate to a charity that you like is your experience and your unique, this lifetime of experiences that have culminated in who you are and what you bring. Like, that is your most valuable asset, and contributing that towards helping them structurally improve how they do things is far more valuable than whatever like monetary donation you're going to make.
Okay, yeah, fair point. Now, stepping back, you mentioned earlier that this year, obviously, you had to pivot the way in which you do this project. But I guess for most of us, it's had a profound impact on all facets of our life, the health crisis that we're going through. What are your thoughts on it?
On COVID, like how it's
Yeah,
affecting our lives?
and not just our lives in general, but the way we do business, like what sorts of trends you see coming out of it, if any. Maybe you don't see any. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on it? Longer term implications that we should be paying attention to.
So, I mean, something that you and I have known about for a while as, nomads and remote workers is that remote work is perfectly here to stay. It's adequate. It's, I would argue, more effective. And I think it's like this pandemic has kind of brought the rest of the world, it's forced the rest of the world to acknowledge this and to adapt and start to adopt remote work. So I think, that's clearly the biggest trend that's coming out of this work-wise, is that people have now kind of powered through that initial awkward phase where like they didn't know if they could do this, but now they're doing their jobs remotely. I think that's not going back. I don't think you can put that genie back in the bottle once people realize they can work this way and not have a commute. I think people probably miss the office. Like there will be some kind of hybrid where there's like partially work from home and work at the office a few days a week, but there's no way that you're going to be able as an employer to force people to come into an office after this. There's just too many opportunities for remote work and it's too attractive. So I think that's the major one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kicking myself for not buying Zoom stock when it was at 120 when the pandemic started. But yeah, I don't know. Other than that, that's the main one that comes to mind.
Right. But then some people are arguing that that is also culturally biased, in a sense that I was watching, I think a week or two ago, some stats. A journalist was comparing London to Paris. And he or she was saying that I think it was 80% of workers in Paris had returned to the office at that point in time. Whereas in London, it was like less than 50%, 40 something percent. So is it, are we going to see it in a blanket way, or across jurisdictions, across geographies, across cultures? Or do you see like certain cultures and certain, obviously certain industries and certain geographies that are more inclined to remote work over others?
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, it's not going to be uniform across the board, right? But I think the important the important event, like you've had enough critical mass now adopt this.
Mhm.
And I think a phenomenon that you're going to see is like the best people are always the ones who will leave first and who will demand, who will demand the remote option now. And so I think we have enough places that have adopted it. You have companies like Twitter and I think Pinterest and a few of these others that have proclaimed, yeah, we're going to offer remote work permanently now. This is not going back. So once you have enough of those dominoes fall, then there's options now, right? And so like as soon as enough options exist for those key people who want to be remote, it just forces everyone else to adopt it, otherwise sacrifice their best talent. So I think that this pandemic, this is like the one silver lining of it, is it forced this issue. There's enough people that embrace it now, where I think there's enough options, and it's just here to stay. And like everyone's got to fall in line and start at least offering partial telecommuting to be competitive.
I hear you. Now, what I also think about is that whole networking effect. So we do enjoy working in certain industries, and we do excel in certain industries because we become a part of that ecosystem. So for example, last 7 years I've been in Singapore, and it's obviously a financial hub. I work in finance. So whether it's in Starbucks, at seminars, at networking events, I'm bumping into and meeting really interesting people, and we feed off of each other. We share, we refer business each other's way. We share ideas, and I guess the ecosystem grows and develops as a result of that. Now, when you have that decentralization, so if let's take Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, if that gets dispersed and people just scatter wherever they go, would we lose that networking effect, that whole ecosystem? How would it function?
So certainly you lose what they call creative collisions, like those by having a certain density of those folks running into each other, just completely serendipity. Like, yes, you're going to lose some of that. But I mean, look at like what happened with us, right? Like we're two random people that met at a meetup in Lisbon. Like, I think this is going to continue to happen. I think it just distributes where people are going to be. But it's funny, like I read something the other day of, this exodus that you see of folks leaving San Francisco, but then all running into each other in like, Salt Lake City, Utah or something. They're like, now, because there's enough San Francisco people all going to the same places that like they're still starting to bump into each other. So I don't know. Like, I think there's plenty of ways, and there's plenty of like side things that you can get involved with that will still help you, network remotely and meet people. So I don't know. I mean, yes, it's going to change, but I don't think I think it's going to deleverage San Francisco in terms of like they're no longer like Silicon Valley may not have its unique advantage anymore by that density. But if anything, I think that creates an opportunity for other places to come up,
Right. So it won't be a centralized. There'll be lots of little hubs rather than one big hub. Okay. I see what you mean. Now, in terms of the whole city experience, and this is something else that's being argued. I see it being argued both ways, in that some people are saying that, okay, cities are dead, like New York is dead, LA is whatever, London, Hong Kong. And then on the flip side, I watched an analyst on Bloomberg, I think it was 2 days ago, and she's saying, no, it's temporary. New York will come back. So do you see de-urbanization being a thing, or do you think it's just a temporary glitch?
I mean, I guess I'm not an oracle here. I don't have a crystal ball. Like my opinion is, people will flee those places because there's less of an advantage for being there now that like things are so remote friendly. But then the people that stay, there's always going to be the people that want to stay in New York and want to stay in San Francisco. And so it's going to keep the hardcore, like, diehard fans. So I don't think it's going to go away. It's just going to change. And yeah, I don't really have a better answer than the next person on this subject.
Okay. Any other trends or any other, opportunities or just phenomena that people who run their own businesses, people who are entrepreneurial should be kind of like, pay attention to this, because this may be something that would impact you? That you could think of? No?
I mean, sort of getting comfortable with, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I can
I don't know if I lost you there. yeah, like getting comfortable with remote meetings like this one, and doing podcasts. I think, what you have going, like having a podcast is the new business card. This is literally building up rapport and the ability to connect and get good at interviewing and telling stories and meeting people, and like just like expanding your surface area by having something like a podcast that contains your personality and puts it out there and allows people to interact with that asynchronously, and then they get to know you and now they want to do business with you. Like, I just think I have a podcast as well, as Nomad Podcast. It's a great, I think it's the new business card, basically. I think it's a good thing to have.
Okay. Yeah. The whole idea of online branding, because there's a reduced possibility or probability of people meeting you face to face. So therefore, on the online space, which is where people are spending more time, that's your chance to make an impact, to make an impression, to distinguish you from other people who may provide similar services. Now, you mentioned that you have a podcast. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So just for the record, it's basically paused right now because I think it's kind of tone deaf to be promoting nomadic travel at the moment. But Nomad Podcast, nomadpodcast.com is the URL. I've done, I think, 45 interviews with folks who I've met over the course of my travels. I've been to 40 countries over the last 5 years.
Wow.
And so I've gotten to meet a lot of incredible people, and we basically, I'm always just curious of what takes people on the road, what motivated them to do that, and what did they get from that experience, and how did it impact their business? Because most of these people have to figure out how to work, like start a business and then run it remotely. So I think that's super interesting. And it self-selects for, I think, naturally amazing people. So that's the story of it.
Okay. And you mentioned it's on pause right now because the whole nomad landscape is being impacted by what's going on right now. Do you see the impact being longer term, or would it return to what it previously was in X number of months? What are your thoughts?
I have a hard time seeing us ever going back to normalcy in the sense of like, exactly the way it was. I think this is like, to some extent, this is kind of the new normal. I think, and I'm not an epidemiologist or anything, but like as the vaccine comes out and as herd immunity and all that stuff, it may get back to the state where we just don't think about it as much anymore. But like wearing a mask is just like second nature, and this is just kind of how we operate. So I don't know.
Okay, because I'm thinking that some of the factors that are at play would mitigate against, and will not mitigate against, but would have a really long-term impact. So, for example, previously, our ability to travel was moderated by a visa system. You have a passport, you get a visa, you can go or you can't go. Now, like, it seems as if all visas have been effectively canceled. And now it's whether the nation that you're connected with citizenship wise has some sort of travel bubble or some sort of travel corridor with the place that you want to go. And that's a moving target. So for example, when I came here at the end of August from the UK, and yes, at that point in time, it was allowed, as in the UK had a travel bubble with Portugal, but then like 2 days after I landed, it was withdrawn. So it's really like a moving target. And then and some jurisdictions they require you to get tested like 7 days or 3 days or 2 days in advance, double tests. It's just becoming increasingly difficult. And with Asia in particular, essentially from China all the way down to New Zealand, they have stopped all non-essential travel.
This is a perfect example of what you're talking about when you say citizenship. Like, there's these weird anomalies. So I'm an American, a U.S. citizen. I was living in Bali until the early part of August. I came back to Portugal because I have residency in Portugal. But there's all this question, like, so they're not accepting Americans. but it's based on where you're coming from, because
Yeah.
it's only in America that it's out of control. Like Bali, it was under control. But at the same time, I had to fly through Madrid to get to Portugal, because Portugal wasn't accepting any non-EU inbound. So, I mean, you just have like, you have to kind of learn how to work within the constraints of what exists. But yeah, you're right. Like there's just going to be weird revocations of travel access and whatnot. And this is kind of what we have to deal with now.
And your experience perhaps is another point for people to consider, having other residencies or citizenships as fallback positions, because you had the opportunity to come to Portugal because you had a plan B already in play, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's a guy called what's his name, Sam something, Flag Theory. If people listening want to Google it, yeah, like there's this whole kind of rationale about how you want to diversify in the same way that you want to diversify assets across different asset classes. You want to have flag theory. You want to have like a bank account somewhere and a residency in a few places and like options, basically, precisely for this scenario, right? Like who could have predicted this? And yet there's a great reason why I could go to the US, but the US is a dumpster fire right now, COVID-wise. So like I would way rather be in Portugal. So yeah.
So you practice flag theory yourself? Okay. Yeah.
I mean, not to the degree that guy does, because he's got like 5 passports or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like I respect the philosophy of it, and I think it's a great idea. And you know, anything. I'm a big fan of just like in general self-reliance, redundancy, like you know, having contingency plans and having multiple ways of doing things. If you do any amount of nomadic travel, you kind of naturally start to pick up this idea like, oh, I need redundant power. I need a fallback if my computer dies. I need to have like redundant navigation and communication. And like you start to think in terms of the function of the thing and like having a plan B and C for every critical thing. So yeah.
I'm a huge fan of that philosophy. Again, you do not have all your eggs in one basket, because it could get kind of messy. Like right now, there are people who have been separated from their families because of the whole travel ban. There are people that can't get to where their banks are. So if you've been banking in Singapore, if that little token that you have, if the battery runs out, what you going to do? You cannot get your money, you know, just little things like that. And you're right. So building in redundancy into all facets of how you run your business, how you run your finances, your personal residency, citizenships, it is the way forward. And in terms of parts of the world, do you see certain, I mean, I know that, you know, nobody has a crystal ball, but I'm just interested in getting points of view, and especially from someone like you who's traveled so extensively. So you've seen how various countries evolve as from an insider perspective. On the coming out on the other side of whatever it is we're going through right now, do you see some countries being interesting ones to watch? As in, they seem to have it under control, and maybe it's a place that someone may want to plant a flag at some future point in time?
I mean, so you've got like the world's biggest A/B test happening right now, right? Like you have a place like Sweden that said, we're not going to really change much. We're going to just kind of let this play out, and we may take some hit early on, but like we'll get to herd immunity faster, and this will be ultimately like a net win for the society. And it's like, regardless of how that plays out, like thankfully that we do have this diversity of countries trying different things, because then that can only benefit everyone to see like what is the best path and what worked better. So in terms of like which ones do I mean, I don't, again, man, I like how Portugal's handling it. The numbers are terrible, and like Spain seems to be having a really hard time. We're right next door to Spain, and we are doing like 10x better than they are numbers wise. So I don't know, like but I think the EU is a great place to be. I do like stepping back from the pandemic, just in general. I like the EU's approach to privacy. I just think that they, like, the GDPR moved all of humanity forward, even though it was a EU specific thing. It forced US businesses and businesses everywhere that had any EU customers, they had to comply with the regulation. So it leveled up the privacy standard for everyone worldwide. So I think things like that are pretty awesome. But I think privacy. I also think that food wise, I think the EU is very progressive in terms of like this GMO and like as a lobbyist getting in there and basically trying to strip away the meaning of the organic label and like, basically pay off and like make organic meaningless, basically. So I think the EU is far more protective of that and like what goes into your food and making sure that like it's not bought and paid by Monsanto, to further their agenda. So I like that aspect. But yeah, in general, I'm happy with EU. Asia, like that was my first time in Bali, but that was a beautiful place and like some of the kindest people there. And, they just have a completely different approach to everything. But I mean, I love it. It was an amazing experience. So I think all this, just to put a bow on this, like it can only benefit everyone to have all these radically different approaches to things and watch how it plays out. And then ideally we have some way of universally like retrospect, looking at okay, how did this play out and why did Sweden go that way and what was the end outcome of that? Because if you can then incorporate those lessons and then apply that, even if you weren't the first adopter of that A/B test, if it turns out that, yeah, that was the way to go, then it's never too late to then at least learn that lesson and go back and apply it from here forward with your locale. So I don't know if everyone's maybe doing the retrospective and incorporating the lessons as much as they should be, but thankfully, at least all these A/B tests are happening worldwide.
I like that. I like the way you framed it as the ultimate A/B test. Because and it's amazing how a phenomena, there's something that happens and everything just switches around like 180 degrees. Because like if we had this conversation like a year ago, Europe was like the sick man of the world. The growth was just really stagnating. It was the headlines were about protesting, immigration crisis. And the US was growth, and Asia, explosion. Things are going well business-wise. And now all of a sudden, it's upside down. So, things could really change pretty quickly. But for now, I see that as well with at least people in my network. You have a fairly large jurisdiction where you can move around, where you can have less densely populated centers. Like Lisbon as a city, it's pretty small and relatively like spread out, the metropolitan area. You have access to decent healthcare. In some jurisdictions, as we know, food is becoming an issue as supply chains are disrupted. But the EU is to a large extent food sufficient. So you're right. At this moment in time, the EU is definitely an interesting and appealing place to be. You're right. I see that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you raised an interesting issue there. Yeah, the healthcare, right? Like, this is something that, now as an EU resident, I'm afforded the benefits of the healthcare system here. Not so in the US. You look at what we pay there, it's just astronomical costs. And it really, until you're outside of that, like if you grow up in the US and that's all you just assume that, okay, it just costs this much everywhere you go. But then you get to a place like Portugal and you realize like, oh no, like everyone has really good healthcare and it doesn't, it's just part of what you get. Which is yeah. So again, the A/B test will, remains to be seen how it plays out. But like, I saw someone tweeted a thing like number of people bankrupted in Japan through, healthcare issues, 0. Sweden, 0. Portugal, 0. Like, right, it goes down the line like 20 things, and it's like U.S. last year, 670,000 people or something, bankrupted from a healthcare problem. That's just, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, and that in itself would have implications as there will be clear winners from this situation. Now, electorates will go back to their elected officials and say, well, hold on, let's challenge these sacred cows. Let's challenge these preconceived ideas. Maybe we can borrow a page from these guys, their playbook, because it worked and whatever. So yeah, and I think that this is a great moment in that it will spark a wider debate. And wherever you are in the world, there will be some sort of meaningful change. So, all right.
Sure.
On that note, Sean, thanks for your time. I appreciate you sharing your insight and your perspectives.
Yeah, man.
All
Good
right.
talking to you. Cheers.
All good.
Please subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Our books and upcoming event are available at htj.tax. Email us at help@htj.tax to engage us, to advise on international tax or business matters.